may not want to listen to me again, but
Do you want to turn that off for the time being?
it's fine. If you want to leave it on.
You're good, you're going
Okay,
first.
yeah, I just didn't want you to.
You're first.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, you're first.
Oh.
Hang on, he's gonna introduce, I've got people introducing everyone, and then, there you go.
Go ahead. Guest speaker, Dr. David Cochran is an associate professor in the Department of Geology and Geography and Geology, USM. Cochran received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Geography at the University of Texas in the year 1990. As an undergrad, he also minored in Latin American Studies. An interesting fact about him is that he can fluently speak both English and Spanish. Yeah.
More or less.
More or less. More or less.
Might be better in Spanish.
All right. He later received a Master's of Arts degree in Geography at George Washington University in 1996. He finished his schooling at the University of Kansas, where he received a Ph.D. in Geography in 2005. As a teacher, he has served on staff at USM from 2003 to current to now, teaching courses in the spring, summer, and fall semesters. He is an undergraduate and graduate academic advisor in the Geography and Geology department on campus. He provides professional services to the university and geographical organizations. A few of his achievements include teaching 7 courses on world regional geography, cultural geography, and conservation and natural resource management. He has also served as co-editor to the Southeastern Geographer in 2012 to 2015. He produced state and national geographical maps in the year 1995 for, and this is a long one, the National Association of Regional Councils Directory of Regional Government Associations of the United States. Hope that I got that right. A few of his peer-reviewed articles include assessing the vulnerability of tourism in San Juan, Nicaragua, and telling the story of African Americans in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Good job.
Did you get background check? That's really impressive. I didn't even know all that stuff about him.
You forgot all of it, huh?
Yeah, boy. Well, thank y'all for coming. Would it be good to turn off the light, you think, or you want to keep the light on? Maybe that would. Okay. Yeah, let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it'll be enough light. Yeah, I appreciate being here. It's a great honor, and to have Monique here, and to have all you here. It's just a great thing to be a part of, and I appreciate the offer. When Tammy and I first talked about this in January, I had to be quite honest that I really do not know much about the Houma Nation. And I felt like, I wanted to come clean on this. But Tam and I were talking about this, and she thought that a kind of an introduction to the geography, and particularly to the human environment processes that go on in the Gulf Coast region would be a helpful introduction. And so that's sort of how I envision this, and as I got further and further into this, I began to consider a lot of the political ramifications of the presence of people in the Gulf Coast, and the reasons that we're there. Because I think that if you look at mainstream society, the reasons that we have the cities and the highways and the intercoastal waterways, those reasons are very different than the reasons that the Houma Nation are where they are. And so I wanted to contrast that a little bit. And so my title really has a lot more to do with what I would say would be mainstream U.S. society, what we see on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, what we see in the big cities of the Gulf Coastal region. And then the overlapping claims and accumulating liabilities will hopefully become clear as I go through the talk. I'm a cultural geographer by training, and over the course of my, boy, that's blue. Over the course of my my education, which I'm still learning, so don't think just because I'm a professor that I'm not learning anymore. but over the course of my education, I've come to identify with a really a transdisciplinary field called political ecology. Political ecology emerged out of geography and anthropology, sociology, and it really is something that is truly transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary, if you will. And what it deals with is, first of all, it looks at humans and their environments, humans and how they interact with the environment. And as you all might be able to appreciate, that's very dynamic. It varies a great deal across geographical space. It varies a great deal within a society, so that certain groups interact with the environment in different ways than other groups. One of the real big contributions of political ecology is to provide that political dimension and look at particularly how social conflict, and for example, in our society we can talk about ethnic conflicts, race, class, gender, tensions and divides in one way or another. And the idea behind political ecology is that these conflicts actually influence how we interact with the environment. And maybe another way to look on this is a society ridden with conflicts tends to be an unsustainable society when we look at its relationship to the natural world. So that's my theoretical piece. I'll move forward into the region itself. This is a map from the USGS that shows not just the Gulf Coast Plain, but all of the Gulf and Atlantic coastal plain. And for those of you, if anyone has traveled through the area, you'll know that it's pretty flat. You can drive almost down, to the U.S.-Mexico border and drive along the coast, and you'll never really see a lot of terrain. You'll never get above even 100 feet above sea level. It's a very flat, very low-lying region. It's also a region, as we'll see, marked by a lot of rivers and wetlands and estuaries of one sort or another. You have to go far inland into the Piedmont before you really start seeing any appreciable topography. And the Gulf Coast is a region that is marked by rivers, and really, this is a very significant point. Much of the drainage of the eastern side of the United States, this would be the Continental Divide over here, much of the drainage actually funnels down into the Gulf of Mexico. You have some very minor drainages along the east side of the Appalachian chain, and you have the Great Lakes, which drain northward. But you'll see that the bulk of the north, or I should say, the continental United States is draining towards our neck of the woods, so to speak, and that's kind of interesting in a way. In this area, we also see some of the rivers being quite iconic. Think of the Rio Grande, the iconic line between North America and Latin America, between the U.S. and Mexico. Of course, the Mississippi, we can't forget that. But then there's any number of other smaller rivers which don't really come up at the continental level, but certainly are significant regionally. Think of the Pearl or the Pascagoula or the Mobile or Alabama-Tombigbee river system. All those have a great impact in their own local settings. Now, the unique quality of this region is it's a coastal region, so all the rivers are coming from far away to meet on the Gulf Coast. They're all converging on the Gulf of Mexico. So we're at a very interesting place environmentally. Of course, the Mississippi certainly takes the prize as being the continental river, the most iconic river of North America. There you can see a snapshot of it right near the cemetery in Natchez, looking out at its channel. Amazing, I mean, just so wide, such a powerful river. The current, if you don't really see it from up on the hill, but if you see debris floating down the river, you'll realize just how fast that water is flowing, looking for the ocean, looking for the sea. Further downstream, of course, New Orleans, you can see out in the distance like Pontchartrain and the river winding its way through downtown on its way to the Mississippi Delta, not the Mississippi Delta that Mississippians think of, which is actually the convergence of the Yazoo and the Mississippi, but this is the true Delta, the mouth of the Mississippi as it extends outward into the sea. And think, in this picture, there's so many, where's the line between land and water? It's not always that obvious. Where's the line between salt and fresh? That is very definitely not very clear from far away. You would have to know the water, you would have to feel it, you would have to taste it in order to really know where the real edge of the Gulf is, in a sense. At the mouth of the Mississippi River, I don't think I'd suggest you taste it, and we'll get to that in a little bit. This is the mouth from space. This is from 1971. This is the Mississippi Delta extending outward into the Gulf. There it is in 2001, the 7th Landsat satellite. A couple of things of note. There's actually, this one is longer. There's more sediment that's being pushed outward into the edge of the continental shelf. But there's also some very noticeable disappearance of land, particularly in this area right here south of the channel. If you look in that area back in 1971, there was actually a fairly extensive area of land. So these are very dynamic, very much changing over time, and particularly with manipulation of engineers, right, of people doing stuff to the channel. That's going to have a very clear outcome in the morphology or the shape of the channel. Now, another thing, maybe closer to home, with regard to Houma, is the Atchafalaya Basin. The Atchafalaya, it represents a relic channel of the Mississippi and the Red River. The Atchafalaya River, which extends from upstream from Baton Rouge down into the Gulf Coast, is navigable and is maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That basin is a natural feature. It's the largest wetland in the United States, but it also is a heavily impacted landscape, a landscape that is utilitarian. Engineers have figured out that they can divert water from the Mississippi. If the Mississippi is in high flood, they can divert water into the Atchafalaya, effectively sacrificing, a generation of life, and at least in some areas, and preventing the Mississippi from flooding Baton Rouge and New Orleans. This, of course, has to do with this penchant that sadly our society has, that we can always fix it, we can do it better than nature, and that's a dangerous path to go down. Here's some snapshots of the Atchafalaya, a beautiful wetland, swampy environment. As I said, the largest in North America. Extensive swamps and waters, and of course across the middle of it we have the Atchafalaya Bridge, where Interstate 10 crosses the basin. That's the third longest bridge in the United States, and is again another engineering marvel. And yet, look at it on the landscape. It's an amazing thing. The Gulf Coast region is characterized by a lot of other places, a lot of other settings. Bayou Sauvage, just right outside of New Orleans, Honey Island Swamp, an area that was directly hit by Hurricane Katrina, and you can see it in the sediments. And a friend of mine, a geomorphologist, actually did research after Katrina and was able to see just how much sediment came in to Honey Island Swamp. The trees let it come in, but then they kind of kept it. And that's an interesting adaptive mechanism, in a sense, that swamps are repositories for sediment. They build sediment, And one way they do that is just to not let it leave, right? It comes in with a hurricane, but it doesn't leave. Certainly the Gulf Coast is also characterized by ephemeral environments like this. This is Petty Boy, right on the state line of Mississippi and Alabama, one of the barrier islands that is beautiful, really, really beautiful to visit. Not a place to be during a hurricane, but certainly a very beautiful place to visit if you can. But the Gulf of Mexico is not simply known for its biological richness, its environmental settings. Certainly there's a lot of beautiful natural environment, but there's also a lot of human stuff. Houston is, to my recollection, the third largest city in the United States. New Orleans and Mobile are smaller, but they're certainly important icons for the Gulf Coast region. And of course, we can't forget the posh beach settings of Pensacola and further east into Destin, where flocks of people come year-round in order to hang out on the beach and get sunburns and whatnot. How do we make this happen? This is an ephemeral environment. Look at that. This is not the place you want to be during a hurricane. It really, really isn't. It's going to be really scary, and these barrier islands, they're not stationary. They move. Petty Boy, Ship Island, Horn Island, they all look the same in the maps unless you really go back in time and you can see perhaps some changes in the overall shape of them. But these things change constantly. They're not supposed to have big skyscrapers on them, and yet we have done so. And we've done so because we believe that we can control the environment. This is an example of that. I mentioned the Mississippi and its flooding potential, and I mentioned the role of the Atchafalaya. There are a number of floodways, the Morganza, the Atchafalaya floodway, and then closer down to New Orleans, the Bonnet-Carre floodway as well. All these are designed to divert water out of the Mississippi away from the urban centers. Now, Baton Rouge is an important refining city. New Orleans is the port of the Gulf of Mexico, with the exception of Houston. Both of them would be the most important places. And so what the Corps of Engineers has done is actually put in diversion channels. This is Morganza right here. This is in 2011. Very, very big flooding that as the spring melts of the northern reaches of the Mississippi River, and that flooding threatened the cities. And so they dumped that water into the Atchafalaya where the swamps could soak it up and the water could avoid New Orleans. But it doesn't always work out that way. That's the 17th Street Canal in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. The levee broke and those neighborhoods flooded very extensively. And that was one of the areas that really was hard hit in New Orleans as a result of Katrina. Another element of our kind of pushing the envelope in a way, really taking things to the limit, thinking that we can figure it out, we can engineer a solution, we can create technologies that will solve the problem sort of in the 11th hour. Of course, I imagine all of you know the importance of Gulf of Mexico with regard to oil and natural gas. The first offshore oil rigs were right around the border of Texas and Louisiana, and they were really early on. They're in, I think, like the 1910s. Since that time, offshore oil technology has advanced steadily until we see just this amazing seascape. These are all the oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico as of a few years ago. This is a deep water rig. This is like the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that blew in 2010. this was being installed after that. They learned some lessons and they thought they could do it again, and they have continued to do it. There's been no interruption in deep water drilling. It's a thing that the companies are getting better and better at, although every time they do it, they do tend to roll the dice in many ways. It's not just offshore, it's also onshore. This is a map of the oil and gas infrastructure, and you can see a very distinctive geography both in the southern portion of Louisiana and also in the northern portion around Shreveport and Monroe up here in the northwest. These areas have active oil production and gas production, and then they also have refining. This is the ExxonMobil refinery, massive, massive facility on the west side of Baton Rouge. You go over the Mississippi on the bridge, and you come down, and there's just all those lights everywhere, and that's that refinery right next to Baton Rouge. That is where a very major center of gasoline production is, and it extends. If you drive I-10 all the way to Houston, particularly at night, it's amazing just how many refineries there are between Baton Rouge and say Baytown on the outskirts, the eastern side of Houston. We all know what oil and gas are used for, but what we don't often consider is the cost. We assume that we all need it. It's a strategic source of energy, and so this explains why the Gulf of Mexico is such an important area, because it's incredibly rich in oil and natural gas. But it comes at a great cost, and that's something we need to consider. A lot of the problem with subsidence and coastal loss in southern Louisiana is the result of the oil and gas industry. It's a result of taking stuff out from the earth, and then those areas starting to subside into under sea level. Here you can see New Orleans itself, and everywhere you see the dark blue, those areas are actually under sea level. So this is a city truly that is potentially underwater. Interestingly enough, the natural levees along the channel of the Mississippi are in red. That actually denotes a certain level of elevation. Those are actually good places to be. Right there where all the river silt for millennia deposited a safe place, and that's where the early Native Americans lived. That's where the French lived, because that was the safest place to be, right next to the river, not into the swamps up by the Pontchartrain. Another element of this, and I'm going to try to speed up here a little bit, is Cancer Alley. One of the main costs of the oil and gas industry in South Louisiana is this region known as Cancer Alley, and you can it's kind of hard for you to see it, but this is a corridor like no other in terms of both oil and gas refinement, but also chemicals of all sorts. And this has actually created a statistical spike in cancer throughout this region of South Louisiana. That's a big cost, and we don't talk about that, really. I mean, we don't see that as a direct cost of oil production. We have to have that oil for our cars, we have to have that oil and gas for other things, and yet it comes at a great cost. One more thing, or another thing that kind of gets at a similar issue in the Gulf Coast. This is again the watershed of the Mississippi, and what you see in green, yellow, and red are levels of nitrogen that are applied throughout the Midwest. I'm sure all of you know that states like Iowa and Illinois, Kansas, Nebraska are areas of great agriculture, lots of grain production, and grains need fertilizer, and nitrogen is the big one. Well, a lot of that nitrogen just washes off and goes into the river, and there it washes down the Mississippi to dump into the Gulf of Mexico to create lowered water quality, and also a situation or a condition called hypoxia, which is where all the oxygen is sucked up out of the water. The nitrogen floats on top, and the algae eats it. All the algae starts blooming, and it sucks up the oxygen from below, leaving these holes in the water where there is no oxygen. Fish can't live without oxygen. They need that dissolved oxygen. And so we see this just a really alarming spike in hypoxia and fish kills all along particularly the Texas and the Louisiana Gulf Coast. But it really exists everywhere. This is a study that was done by NOAA where they actually found low oxygen levels literally the entire northern rim of the Gulf of Mexico. This is an element of our industrial society. It lowers water quality, and it also kills something that we actually use a great deal. One of the big industries, and I would say one of the really important folk industries of the Gulf of Mexico, places like Louisiana and Mississippi, is the seafood, the fisheries, the shellfish, the finfish. These fish have been exploited by local people for centuries. And a lot of this industry remains small scale. It remains family operated businesses. The little guy trying to make a living, and yet trying to make a living in a region where the waters are really, really alarmingly of poor quality. It's sad. There's sort of a bitter irony in many ways, how all of this is sort of on top of each other. To add perhaps to a bit of the lie of the Gulf of Mexico is that in addition to this heavy industrial use, lots of agricultural pollution coming down the rivers, we also see areas that have been segregated off to turn into posh beach resorts. This is Destin. I showed you Pensacola earlier. Seaside, a very elite little town on the way to Panama City. Look at the coast. It's blue. There's no rivers that come in anywhere near, so the water is very high quality. They truck in the sand. It's not real. It's not natural sand. They truck it in. They dredge it off the offshore and bring it in as well. It's sort of a fantasy land, and yet it's part of this region that's so heavily used. But in many ways, these uses are all sort of contradictory to each other. It gets even worse in Mississippi, where you have the casinos, and in New Orleans, where you have all of the tourism that goes on. It's a place where people want to go. It's a place where people want to do certain things, and many people come, and yet other things visit these towns as well. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 came on shore right on the border between Mississippi and Louisiana. There's a picture of Hardy Hall at the USM Gulf Park campus. This is a portion of the 9th Ward underwater. This is actually, I believe this is past Christiane. No, I'm sorry. This is right by Gulfport. This is by the port of Gulfport. All of those container loads being strewn across, and in fact, on top of the debris of the former houses, in many cases, of the people who live there. This is a horrible tragedy, but I think it's an important question to ask: why were we there? Why were we there? Why were we there in such numbers? Why have we committed so much to a region where a Category 5 hurricane can come and destroy decades of public investment, billions of dollars, not in the insurance settlement, but the generations of people investing and growing that area, only to get it all shattered with a single natural disaster that we all knew was going to happen eventually. Another example, BP oil spill coming 5 years after Hurricane Katrina, insult to injury for many of the people, particularly on the Mississippi and Louisiana Gulf coasts. Again, why did this happen? The companies think they can do this. They can do this, but what they couldn't do was stop it once something went wrong. And so we dumped millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, We created a slit that you can see. This is one representation that it really extended across the entire width of the body of water, contaminating the surface and also contaminating portions of the shore. Not as bad as it could have been because of the response. I think really they were able to, and also because of the currents. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was bad. It messed up fishing for a few years. It destroyed a lot of wildlife, a lot of marine life, and it also shattered a lot of lives. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we pushing the envelope to such a degree that this sort of thing can happen? I noticed in the news the other day that that there's now a lot of studies being done in this area, and they're finding actually new species. They're finding new species that have never been in this part of the Gulf. They're not new species; they're known elsewhere, but they're actually coming to this area, and many people think that they're doing so because the oil has finally metabolized to such a degree that these microorganisms can actually consume the oil. It's going to be there for a long time regardless, and the whole ecosystem of this Gulf of Mexico is going to be altered probably permanently as a result of what we have done. So that gets me to the very end. And one of the things I think that all this says to me is that what we're doing, we've embarked upon a course that is not sustainable. It's a course that we think we can do it better than nature. We think we can sort of stop all the gaps. And I think right now we need to sort of rethink that. This is a quote from a classic of sustainability. Sustainable development, it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I don't think we're doing that. I don't think we are actually safeguarding the needs of future generations. This is a figure that I've adapted from a lot of sustainability writing, in which we need to kind of conceptualize our society in a different way. The society and the economy is enveloped within cultural identity. And cultural identity interfaces with environment through spirituality. The spiritual dimension of our society needs to be present in our interaction with the environment. Would we go out and do deep water oil drilling if we had a spiritual connection to the land and to the sea? I think it might be a little different. This sort of relationship mainstream U.S. society does not have yet, and yet Native American society does. This is a very well-worn quote by a chief of the Seneca Nation that talks about 7 generations, that we're looking ahead as one of the first mandates given us as chiefs to make sure and to make every decision that we make relate to the welfare and well-being of the 7th generation to come. What about that 7th generation? Where are you taking them, and what will they have? And I think that's a really important thing to think about, and to look at the Gulf Coast and to consider what we are not doing for that 7th generation. That's all that I have, so I will be quiet now, and I'll turn on the lights first before I do that. But if I don't know how this is going to proceed, but if there's any questions or comments, please fire away. Yes, sir.
I guess it's a simple question. Why do you think that the oil companies continue to rebuild even after all the explosions and the oil spill?
Yeah, I think it's money. I think the BP, the year that Deepwater Horizon happened, you would figure that their annual earnings would show some dip in their profits. It really didn't. It really didn't. There's so much money in oil, it just boggles your mind. And I think that until we ourselves turn off that faucet. Come on in. Yeah. Stand out there. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so speaking of the oil companies, how do you feel about the pipelines in South Dakota?
I'm in South Dakota. It's interesting. I've been watching the tar sands up in Canada for a long time, and every time the price of oil goes up, the Albertans always start talking about the tar sands. It's not going to improve anything really. The price of oil is too cheap. The tar sands cannot be profitably exploited right now, and so really it's kind of an empty gesture in many ways, and I think that it's in a wrong direction. If we start, during World War II, Nazi Germany figured out a way to take coal and make gasoline. And they did that because they were desperate. The world was circling around them, right? And they had no access to the Middle East. And so they figured out ways to get coal and make gasoline. It's not a good way to make gasoline. It's incredibly bad for the environment. It's incredibly bad for carbon dioxide, high levels of CO2 that get put into the atmosphere. We don't need this. We really just don't need it. And so to me, I'm glad there's resistance, to be honest, because I think that more needs to come. And I think people really don't understand. I mean, tar sands, it's like a sand deposit, a buried sand deposit infused with like really tarry oil. And the first thing you have to do is get all the sand out. That costs a lot of money. Then you have to refine it into gasoline. That costs an incredible amount of money. And in the end, you're making gasoline at a cost because you can't ever get it back. So it's kind of sad that it's going forward, to be honest, because I think it's going to raise the hopes of people in Alberta, and it's going to do not a whole lot except complicate things and drive a pipeline through. Is that Sioux land? Yeah. So, yeah.
What about if this thing
Bad
breaks?
decisions.
What about if this thing breaks? How long will it take for the environment to, how long is the damage gonna be?
What, to the pipeline?
Yeah, like it's pipeline ruptures.
Well, I guess it depends on how much.
Right.
The BP oil spill, there was an estimated of like 6 million barrels. I think that's right. And that's in a subtropical ocean where there's a lot of things that are eating it. Oil is made up of fossilized hydrocarbons, and that's energy. And we eat carbohydrates, and microorganisms can actually break down those hydrocarbons and use it as energy. So it's happening pretty quickly. But up there in the north, well, there's not that much biological activity, right? So it's going to take a while. It would depend on how much goes, It's tricky. It's tricky stuff. Oil's tricky because it's actually not. It's an organic substance, and it breaks down. It's not like DDT or something like that literally doesn't break down ever, and it can accumulate in the ecosystem. But if you get a whole bunch of it, it's a contaminant. If you get a whole bunch of it all at once, you're going to have a problem, and it's going to impact life. Other thoughts, other comments? Okay, well, appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, look forward to hearing the rest of it.
I have one
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Why is it that we were doing this grant, the three of us and one other person, and I was reading about the Atchafalaya area, and it was talking about land loss, and actually the Atchafalaya has gained area around that, like St. Mary Parish. I was breaking it down into Houma parishes.
Right.
And St. Mary's Parish has actually gained land, and the rest of it, like near Houma and Terrebonne and
That's lost land.
a lot of land.
Yeah.
Yeah. and I'm not really understanding why that was. I didn't really understand why that was.
It has to do with the position of the mouth of the river, and oftentimes the rivers are the areas that are growing, and between the rivers you get kind of receding. It's a really dynamic coast, right?
Yeah, and the Atchafalaya is different from the Mississippi because Atchafalaya, one from many, so it's like, I think that speaks to like that's a Choctaw word.
Mhm.
So it speaks to like the fingers. Yeah.
Right.
So it splits up all that.
It's real braided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that have something to do with it?
It might.
That
You know,
it's not
the
forced.
well, and the other thing is it's not channelized.
Right.
Because the lower
Yeah, it's
Mississippi
not
is like,
channelized, that's
let's
right.
create a roller coaster
Yeah.
with this river
I think
and
it's
just
great.
shoot it out
Yeah.
into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
And that would add, it adds a lot of velocity, and the sediment can't do what it wants to do, which is lay down. And the river, the curves of the river, that when a natural river it would speed up and
Like
slow
that.
down. And in the process, when it slows down, a lot of the fine sediment's going to deposit on those curves, kind of on the inner side of the curves. And so when you turn it into, when you render it
Straight shot.
brick-brack,
Yeah.
Straight shot, it's just going to
Takes
shoot all that
everything with it,
sediment.
yeah.
And what we're doing now is we're losing Kansas to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Right, Kansas is going to the bottom of the Gulf because it's being shot off the continental shelf down into the abyss, and it's not useful. We have to wait until it turns to limestone and then comes back up, and like 200 million years from now we'll be good.
Yeah.
We'll get that land back, but we're losing valuable topsoil, and it's really kind of sad in a way. So I would say the Atchafalaya, on the other hand, is so different because
Yes.
you've got that. It's a wetland, it's a swamp, and it's just going to catch all that sediment and then just let it feed, like slowly through time, and so it's going to kind of spread out. There is a plan. There's a Louisiana state has a state. I don't know if it's what department it is. Yes, the coast. I found that it looked very ambitious, and I thought, well, that makes me worried right there. But if they could do it all, the thing is like if they could do all that, it'd be great because they allow for some sediments to be collected and preserved. You get some of that land back. It's hard to do. It's so easy just to let it. Just don't mess it up to begin with. It costs a lot of money to do it yourself. And nature will do it. The Mississippi will do it. But we can't have a city right there, it just
Yeah, that you have to
messes it
protect,
up.
that you feel like you have to protect.
Yeah, and obviously from a human rights perspective, you do have to protect it. There's no doubt. We can't evacuate the cities or allow people to die. But it's just we get ourselves into these messes. It'd be so much easier if we just lived away,
Let it be.
let it be. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Tammy, were you asking what it means in Choctaw? Well, Attache, I don't know what that means, but Falaya means long.
Long.
So it's something like long something river. I thought you were like Achafa. I thought you were asking what was one. I was like Achafa. Then you were like,
Well, it's a Chafalaya. It's a Chafa. The river is the Achafa, and then Laya.
Falaya means long though. That's what I
Okay.
thought it was Falaya and long.
It's a Chafa, and that's one Laya. At least that's how they've interpreted it.
Professor Gillespie. You are Gina. Jimmy. Professor Jimmy.
Do you want to play the video first? Or you
No,
want to do your
what's that thing?
Okay, it's just down here. That's the Mozilla icon. So you just press on that, and you can different how you can listen to this. I don't know if that's
It's painted like that, or it's scratched like that.
sick.
Do they have yerba mate there? Yerba mate? Did they have?
Do you guys drink latte? That's further south. Oh, okay. Like Argentina. So I'm gonna jump in real fast. For those of you in this class, these are my students from my Panama Bilingue class. They're here from Panama for 8 weeks. And this is Virgil, and he's gonna talk to you in a minute about his background and his nation. But I want everybody to introduce themselves, just so we all know who y'all are. So we'll start with Virgil. I'll let him introduce himself, and we'll pass it around, and then we'll come back to Virgil. How about that? Just say your name. And, you had something you wanted to say.
Good evening to all. My name is Virgilio. Well, actually my name is Virgilio, but it's long. You can call me Virgil. And I come from Panama Bilingue Group. I'm an English teacher for elementary kids in Panama. So I feel proud to talk about my background and talk about my community, Gunayala region. But first, I want to ask you if you have ever heard about the Gunayala in Panama. Have you seen from the magazine, or have you ever watched through televisions? Have you heard about Gunayala region? Anyone?
You may have seen it with a K or a C. Sometimes in English it's spelled K-U-N-A or C-U-N-A. Houna.
Do they do mola?
Villalaz, yeah.
They do? Yeah, I know.
The mola.
Yes.
You know something about it.
I know about that. Yeah.
Well, for the others here who don't know about my community, I'm here to talk about. And let's talk about a little bit where is it located. Well, the Gunayala region has actually 51 communities, of which 49 are purely Guna population and 2 non-indigenous communities. They are from Puerto Valdía, that is located on the border of Panama and Colombia. I don't know if you can see the map here in Gunayala. We have a lot of communities. We call them islands, islotes. I come from 2 islands. Aili Gandhi is the most populated, and in Aili Gandhi there are a lot of tourism. And my mother come from Aili Gandhi, and my father come from the other island, is River Tiger, Rio Tigre.
Tiger River.
Tiger River, thank you. Customs among indigenous people. Okay, as for the traditions of the Guna, we have dances, traditional dances, and we also use instruments. And nasisis is the maracas, played by women, and the flute, and this way is played by men. And this way we encourage the ceremonies and different parties that we are now you're gonna learn here later. Okay, festivities. We have one of our festivities, Iko Ina, Fest of the Needle. This party is held within the family. At first, the person in charge of doing perforation performs a surgery in the nose of a girl, where a thread is placed embedded in coconut oil to avoid any kind of infection. But it happens when the girl gets maturity or puberty. The other one is in a suite with a haircut. The girl is given a name, a cantule, a traditional, he make a chant called the Dislaigala, it's a scissor song. Cantule is the wisest person in my region, as the old man, but he had a lot of knowledge. And it happens when the girl, for these events happen to the girls. The feast of the Hina Mustiki is the other one, feast of the onset of puberty. It is celebrated the moment of the first menstruation of the girl. She needs to stay in the house during the menstruation of period of menstruation, and the only people who are with her as the mother and the old ladies, not men. And as it said, since she becomes a woman and is suitable for motherhood, there is a ceremony for men and for male puberty, which is accompanied by a large amount of liquor, where women do not participate. Older men perform, and the older men bathe the men as a ritual and at the river and the sea. Let's talk about the dress and the traditional dress for women Guna woman. The women dress in mola and skirts, long skirts, knotted to the waist.
I think you can see better. You can see a little better.
Let me explain you the designs and decorations of mola. The representation of molas they're saying all about the fauna and flora we have surrounded. And they wear bracelets, ankles of Shakiras, and her ankles, gold necklaces, and a red and yellow scarf. They cover their heads when they leave their homes. They also wear gold rings on the nose. They adorn with round gold earrings. They paint their cheeks with it's red using a shiote. But I don't know if you know what is a shiote.
Anato, yeah.
What is it?
It's an herb. It's a little seed that you pound up, and it's this beautiful pigment.
Red.
It is
Actually,
it
called
is
that
red.
shit. I have some seeds.
It's a tree.
A tree?
Uh-huh.
It's a tree.
And they use it for cooking too.
Yeah.
It's real important in Maya cooking as well.
Yeah.
And also they delineate the nose with a black ink. We call it this ink jaguar. Let's talk about Guna man. The man dress very simple, as you see the picture, with a European shirt from the early 20th century, a long plainclothes trousers like pants. They adorn their head with a hat, and we have different. We have different or important ceremonies. We wear tied with gold charms. I like this part because we get money from this. This is like our economy. Where did it come from? The money we earn, we gain. Handicrafts. The women are in charge of this work because women make the molas. They make hamuks, belts, sandals, and the important aspect in the culture of Guna is the making of the molas. As I said, clothing worn by women. The molas consist of geometric figures. You can find the figures of some animals we have in our environment. Every single day we see birds, turtles, crabs, fish. So my mom is a sewer.
She sews. Yeah.
She sews molas, and she can sell. And I remember when I was a child, my grandpa he passed away. He was a Sila. Sila is like a head. He is a chart of the community, a head of island.
Like an ancestor, or an elder.
Yes, like an elder. And I learned a lot of things from him. And he wanted me to speak very well Spanish and English because my grandpa he used to speak English very well. And I remember when my mother and my aunt they were in the border of the sea, and the tourists wanted something to buy, and I reached out to people and tried to say my few words in English, and I used to help my relatives. So it is nice to remember. The molas are made entirely by hand they use their hands. It's a little the work is really
Intricate,
yes,
detailed.
yeah, detailed. Several layers. They use different colors and sewn together. Well, the colorful molas are the most expensive, and we also have the black and white, and they are the cheapest. We can make baskets of various sizes, hats and fans. We find the plants, and then they made it by plants or bamboo sticks.
Those look like
Right,
cane
we
baskets.
saw the cane in the
Is
garden.
it like that, did he say?
We just, yeah. Cool.
Okay, as I said, we use various types of plants for making this handicrafts. For men made the wood carving. It is applied by Kuna men. They elaborate canoes, banks, and other furniture, domestic objects, zoo and anthropomorphic figures, and culinary objects. Because we have the totuma. Totuma is we use when we serve drinks. When serve
Like a bowl
soup.
or a container.
Yeah, a container like a bowl. Let's jump to social and economic organization. And social aspects, the living place. Well, our house is made by bamboo sticks and straws. Paja?
Straw.
Straws?
Or thatch, we call it thatch too.
Yeah. And this is the house. We don't have furniture. We don't have beds. We only have hammocks. The house is just for sleeping. We have another hut that we use as a kitchen. We don't have on the floor concrete cement like this. Well, the types of housing, we have a different use of type of housing. Nega tumat is a big house, room to sleep, as I already said. So nega is a firehouse. It refers to food. I mentioned that our grandmas, our mothers, make the food. This is the Sonek firehouse. In Anega is a chicha house. It's where ceremonies and parties are held. I mentioned that we celebrated the maturity of our kids, and it is settled there inside in chicha house.
Can you tell them what chicha is?
Chicha house is like a drink. Whenever we have any kind of ceremonies of puberty or a birthday party, and we serve chicha, but it's like a liqueur.
Fermented
It's
corn.
strong.
Is it made from corn?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's made by corn.
Fermented corn.
Omaket Nega is a congress house. It's where the Saila gather with the people of the community, and we talk about incidents, or we talk about some rules or some law, from minor incidents to major ones. Uan Nega is a house of the dead. It sounds strange. It's used when a person dies, and then the Saila and Cantule. Remember, Cantule is the wisest person, and he recite a song. It's like a ritual. A person died. Well, marriage, we are monogamous, and it is fun. The groom moves to the bride's house. The groom will be subjected to several tests by the father of the bride, traditionally. The ritual lasts between 3 and 5 days, and when it ends, the groom searches for his belongings and integrates into the house. Oh, but they need to be careful for the father of the bride. He dedicates his efforts to her and his family, and will live under the mandates of his Saka Macheret, his father-in-law. When the father-in-law died, and they have the chance or the opportunity to move to the other house, to buy a house, or to make a house, but before
Until that They have to
until the
stay. Wow.
until the father-in-law died. Economic aspects, fishing, agriculture. We produce products such as coconuts, banana, yuca. You know what is yuca in English?
We say yuca or cassava.
Cassava.
Manioc. We have a couple different ones.
In addition, they are dedicated to elaborate products of craft, mainly the mola. Mola is the first income. Can I say income?
That works.
Yes,
Primary income.
primary income. But nationally, the mola is nationally and internationally. But we need to be careful because we have our mola. Mola is as from our people.
Right, right.
And Costa Rica, they are selling molas, but they are not
Authentic.
authentic.
That's cultural appropriation.
That's cultural appropriation. That sounds so
What
weird,
kind of,
doesn't it?
yeah, what kind of canoe is that? What's that made
Can you
of?
tell me about the canoe?
Yes, we use canoes for fishing. The canoes actually made by man,
Mhm.
by our people. Canoes we use for transportation.
How do you make them?
With I think it's kind of plant, but I don't know what is the real name. But it's a kind of plant with sticks. From the trees.
Uh-huh.
From the
Is
trees.
it a whole tree?
Uh-huh.
Dugout?
It's like a
You dig it
dugout.
out?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like one piece of wood.
came from any kind of tree.
Mahogany?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. See?
And what kind
It's
of
the Gulf
wood?
Coast. It's
Calwa?
No.
Ceiba?
Save, I think it's save.
Save.
Uh-huh. And I investigate.
Yeah.
When I was 13 years, it was my second time to go to visit my community, and I didn't know that we use canoes for transporting, because when we got to the not the island to the land, we need to move. We need to transport to cross the island, and I didn't know we use canoes, and I were afraid of that.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you imagine in
It's a
canoes,
little,
it's
yeah.
little, and the waves of water.
Uh-huh.
But we accustomed to this kind of transportation. Tourism in Gunayala is very common for the Gunas. The tourists go there and have a cultural contact with the Gunas, as I mentioned, and we sell molas, we sell handicrafts, and we have contact with tourists, and we sell them handicrafts. Tourism is especially in a very famous island. The name of this island is Carti. If you want to go to Panama, you need to go to Carti, an island, and of course, my land. A resort, because we have a resort hotel for ecotourism, has been set up in Playón Chico. Is another famous island, and there are other facilities in the community for Achutupu, both in Ailigambí. Other traditions and customs, we have here the kitchen, sogaya, traditional way of cooking and preparing with fire food, the tulemasi kuna food. My Panamanian group know what is tulemasi. We use fish, we use kind of banana, plantain,
Plantain. Yeah, we have those here.
coconut milk, and we made it like a soup, kind of, yes. And fish is our favorite food, so that's why I am very wise.
Lots of omega. Like omega 3.
Urmar, cayucos, means of transportation. Urmar is the name of the boats, the canoes. The cayucos or urmar are simple boats made of wood, driven by means of channels. Kami is the name of in my language.
Which is Dule, right?
This is Tule. Next topic is our architecture. The architecture is simple. The whole structure is sticks. Suar. Suar is the name in my language. Is sticks. Natural wood brought from the forest and without any work of carpentry. We don't need to know all about carpentry or building things. We tie together. We tie the suar, the sticks together with wicker trees, sargi. The structure consists of 2 pillars called puar, main column. And we only have 4 walls. I think 3, 4 walls. The walls are of bamboo sticks, masa, typical of our region, the masa. The roof is straw, soska, werub. The house has no divisions. The kitchen, sogaya, is located separate in another hut, as I mentioned. And the kitchen is small. Mani amit is the economy. Mani amit is when you want to get money, and my cousins and my parents say, hey, mani amit. Mani amit when you want to get a job or something like this. The economy is based on the sale of coconut. We sell coconut. We call it agop. The molas are multicolored garments made by our Kuna women. The molas, for its beauty and industriousness in emblematic art, this is the icon of Panama for the world. It's very famous. Now you know. If you want to know something about Guna or Tule, all about my region, you know molas. But now it's now it's international popular. Nogakope is like a danza. Una is a dances, traditional dance. Okay, it means that we use chicha in Totuma. It's a liquor, a strong liquor made by corn. During ritual ceremony, we make like a choreography, and the women play the nasis. Nasisi is the maracas, and the members of the choreography is six ladies and 6 gentlemen. The gentlemen play the flute, and you have to mark the rhythm at the same time. This is my favorite part. Tulemasi is our kuna food. Didiar is a fried fish. We use patacones next to the fish. The tulimasi is a traditional dish that includes ingredients: the fish, the banana, and the coconut milk. We use lemon and spicy if you want. The fried fish with patacones and lemon is another typical dish of Punayala. Both of I love a lot.
Are the patacones plátanos?
Platanos.
And then smashed.
Before I finish, I want to talk about a little bit about my background.
You want to put the light on, Kala? Oh, you want to? Yeah, thanks.
I was born in the capital, Panama City. My parents moved to Panama City with me as I was a little baby. And one of my experience, but I learned a lot from it, was my parents made me to learn more about Spanish, because they worry about for me to speak very well Spanish, and my grandpa pushed me to speak English. And I remember, my grandpa made the lessons in English, and I hated English, and I just cried because I don't want to speak. I want to speak my dialect, but it was in my house. My family set the rules. The rules were you don't have to speak in dialect, because they were worried about me for speaking English and Spanish, and I hated Spanish, and I used to hate English because I wanted to speak my dialect, but I am not allowed.
Oh, wow.
But when I grew up, my parents realized that they make mistakes, but we learn from mistakes. Now I just went to my island 2 times when I was a child, but I obviously I couldn't remember. And when I was 14 years old, I have been there 1 week, 2 weeks, around 2 weeks, and I asked my mother and I asked my father, please, you need to teach me how to speak my dialect, my dialect Tule. So I know many words in my dialect, but I am not able to speak perfectly or understand. But now I practice with my mother, and but things happen for a reason, right? And my grandpa went to Mississippi years ago. Went to Mississippi. I didn't know that.
Wow.
My relatives said, "Oh, you go to Mississippi for this program," and my grandpa, before he died, he wanted me as an objective to speak fluent English and to sell the art, the handicrafts, and sell my community. And now I'm here, let you know all about me.
Oh, good job.
Thank you. You have any questions?
Go ahead and tell them your name when you ask your question. Go ahead, Dustin.
Okay, my name's Dustin.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How long does it take to make the molas? How long does it take to make
Oh, it takes times.
Very long time.
It takes very long time. And women like my mom, if you let her know with a period of time, and she actually is really fast, but very
Detailed.
precise
They-
and detailed.
I have some. I'll bring them next time. I'll bring
Around
them
2 months, if you want a sweater, we can. My mom made molas and sew
Just sew them into a
onto
shirt.
sweater or shirt.
Oh.
It takes like 2 months
2
if you
months.
want a sweater or shirts. If you want a blanket, it takes
Long time. Yeah. It's all hand cut and it's amazing how they do it. It's really cool.
Are the islands experiencing the rising water?
Yes, I was forgetting about that, but I wanted to share it with you. A few years ago, in Panama City, we had many floods, and many different islands were affected by the raising of the sea level because of the change of climate, the global warming. And the communities, 2 communities, they don't exist, and they move to the other part of islands. Or the government helped them to move to the capital, to the city. It is sad, but it depends on us to take care of the environment. And the islands are the regions that really are being affected.
What is the population of Villalaz?
Well, we have, it decreases 46,000 people, but it now is distributed. Many are in the islands, and all the others move to the provinces, Colon and the capital,
Bigger
Panama.
cities.
But they are. I was searching, and it's about 46,000 people. Tule. And you know something, Gunayala, and before we call it Kunayala, and we have Tule, Dule, but now now it is because we don't have the sound. Our phonologic is different. We don't have we pronounce g, so we change
But the
it.
Spanish can't hear go as well as they can hear cook, and that's why it got spelled with a K or a C for many times.
Yes, and before, in the past, Guna, was considered like dialect. Nowadays, we change it. We are language. because there are many teachers. They are teaching
So
students.
they're teaching, the students learn in Guna, in Dule.
Guna and Tule. Uh-huh. In my school, there are Gunas. I need to now. I speak now 3 languages,
Okay.
and it's really convenient to help my school, to help my principal, to help the community and parents as well.
Has tourism not more happening with them? Or they gonna affect the island?
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
How has the tourism changed the island? Has it brought like more positive changes or negative?
It is positive, I think. It's my point of view, my personal point of view.
Thinking on that same line, that most of the tourists go to one of the islands, so the other islands are more or
Mhm.
less get to do
Yeah.
what they normally do.
Okay.
It's not,
Yeah.
it's sort of focused, so
Mhm.
you don't have tourists wandering all up and down the islands like we do. On
And
the
a few islands are like very close. They don't want visitors.
Right.
But many of them, we are open, and you are very welcome.
But Hawaii's like that too, where there's a couple of tourist islands and then other people practice their daily lives in relative peace.
Mhm.
And some of the indigenous people
Yeah.
are closed, the community is closed off.
My grandpa passed away. He was asylum. So I am like a legacy.
So is that an inherited
Yeah.
situation? So I want everybody just to say your name really fast, just so everybody knows everybody. Start with Tyler.
I'm Tyler.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Lenina.
Nick.
Eric.
Sarah.
Adam.
David?
Jeannie.
Tammy.
Monique.
Yay. Thank
You are so likable.
You are too. You guys too. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. They have watched
Can we take a little break?
You guys want to go to the restroom or something?
I think that the Panamanians are going to leave. They have to tell.
Okay, let them go.
Yeah, I know. I know. We're going to take a little break.
So we're gonna.
Wait. We want to take a quick picture of everybody. Let's take a picture. Let's just go back to Panama. Everybody up. Everybody in the picture. Everybody in the picture.
That's what Jeannie does when she comes.
And you did that too, Tam. You take pictures of other people.
Professor Jean, you need to be in the picture.
He'll take it. And he'll take it with his too. Come on, David.
Probably shouldn't stand in front. Let me get up here.
Can we turn off the,
Oh, wait, let's, let me
Yeah, turn
turn
that off.
just so we're not all blinded. There we go.
Shorty. Get in there, Dustin. Get in there, Dustin. Get in front.
Can I get
Come on, Bert. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, go use the restroom and then come on back. Yeah.
I'm trying to be down. We gotta go to Panama.
They're not DSLRs. They're real
Lord, you can find a pool.
Oh, yeah.
Both sides, too.
And that one's going.
I hear people speaking.
Think of that calm on the side. Compared to yours?
I know. I hope I don't forget.
Okay, but listen, let me show you something.
Excuse me. May I speak in
He's coming back from work.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I used to work at Fort General.
Okay.
I'm a senior patient account service rep. I work in the ER.
Yeah,
and
I think he's
also work
pretty
in
young.
patient.
He may be older than his
Yeah, I'm sure. I didn't know if you were still
No, this pays the bills. So I just work with Tammy.
Yeah.
And then like the Fort General.
Yeah, that's the cheapest thing to do. But they
Yeah,
have,
I work with Tammy about 9 years.
the method of which
let me see, they have, they sell.
He's good. He actually moved to Bay St. Louis. Yeah, he's down Keystone and Gulf Coast now.
Really?
He's still in the
But
environment.
the president of Panama.
Come to here or?
No, he teaches down there. He doesn't.
But if that is interesting.
He doesn't teach up here anymore. He
first got that,
transferred
he
down last
Yeah,
after last
they
year.
sell the
He was
leaf
teaching a bunch of
that you can
Yeah.
buy
and he
in
just decided he just kind of wanted to change.
in a roundup
But
in
he's still, I don't know if he's
some
sold his
alcohol
houses here
thing
or not. I
that you
never,
drink.
I haven't been good or
I
not.
They have, you know, like a, yeah.
Oh.
There was
Yeah.
one.
Which is the
flight-
same as
yeah,
eating
there was
the
one
branding.
girl I saw him on his bike somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he moved right over to
Yeah.
Point of Break.
Wow, like people
Right.
sell little.
They
Poison
sell
ivy
the
capsules.
poison ivy
Right.
capsules, yes, they do.
I think, yeah.
Oh, did you find her something?
He's kind of like,
Yes.
he
Got it.
moved here.
You love it.
And then about
What is
4
that?
years later, moved behind T-Bone.
Right.
And then, I think, like 4 or 5 years after that, he moved to the coast. So he just has to,
Is that your camera?
he just has to move.
Live in
around.
one place.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But I still work with Tammy.
Poison
and,
ivy.
I'll see him this year.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
At the pedal?
Yeah.
Pedal
I'll
power,
be there this year.
Where is that? I saw a
Eat
flyer.
poison ivy becomes you. But
You
there's
can
a,
Google it. It's on a, like you can type in Williams Park. It's on an app. You can Google it.
there's a thing that you can buy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm down with you. Take a picture of it, maybe.
So you know these things that you don't
Right
get.
here.
Right.
That's cool. When is that? It's coming.
8th and 9th.
Look at that. Oral ivy.
Usually it's the 3rd.
Yeah, oral ivy. And what it is it's poison ivy in a jar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You do not do some of that. I saw one.
I thought I gotta do it too now, and cause I never used to have any reaction to it. And now I guess it's cause I'm out so much, you know, around it so much, and I'm touched, you know.
Yeah.
We might
Yes,
do
oral ivy, oral
They renovate
ivy,
Walker's
oral
Home.
ivy.
There was one that
They remediate because there's toxic mold in it. That's awesome. Yeah,
Wow,
they told us we could go
1341.
there
Yeah.
the entire summer.
And you can eat a leaf and do the same thing, but there it is, it's oral ivy, and it contains poison ivy. See, all this pre-contact solution, pre-contact is, poison ivy, pre-contact is putting that leaf in you so that when you encounter it, your body doesn't have a reaction to it. 70% alcohol,
Right.
and the best is
What do you
Rhus
do these days? Like, are you
toxidendra, poison ivy extract.
I kind of made an exit with the Human Rights Center a few years ago, and I'm working with social work. but we're doing
Does this product contain jewelweed? See, it's not jewelweed because jewelweed is for after you get it.
Yeah.
Sort of what we're calling it.
But this is for to prevent you from getting
And,
it.
so that's taking up a bunch of my time.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
She's got a
Well,
bad
that's what we're
case of
trying to
poison
do.
ivy.
Yeah.
Back up, kind
So I was at the Hispanic and these two guys almost came in the way.
But still.
Yeah, no, they were
Just
Hispanic.
personal space, personal space.
Oh, sorry, you're.
Personal space.
He's trying to block.
Oh, I
One that
Just climb over
voted,
the table.
yeah, you go. One that voted for Donald, one that voted for Donald Trump, and the other one that voted for Hillary. And so I said, well,
I think they're ready.
my family's not going back.
the Indians left.
Because they make phone calls to people in town and nobody will come out to town. So it is that bad.
No, I didn't spray it on the, I'm gonna spray it on the hospital. That's because
In labor and
petitioner
delivery,
smells like,
patients from Mexico and other places, they're scared to talk to you. These folks are
Here are a
scared.
few.
So I wish somebody could organize and talk to
Petitioner
them.
smells
See,
just
you
like
do
it.
some work with them, yeah, see,
It may
like,
have
Weed stuff.
I don't know
Oh,
if
that
you know
jewelry
this.
is orange.
Papa Ken.
Yeah, the plant is
I don't know if you know Papa Ken.
the black log, that's what you're
He's
saying,
doing a lot of work
But
with
it
this.
doesn't, I put it online, it doesn't stain, it just goes orange, but it
Yeah.
doesn't stain.
Yeah,
No, it's a
yeah.
real big issue, especially when you think about it like this, and it's like,
But in
you know,
maintenance,
this is
it
what,
felt
this
great.
is the whole
Right.
Felt
thing,
fine,
is
didn't
the
it?
race is like the
Are you
police
sure you wanna go
don't
home?
want to
Yeah, I am, because if I don't, then I
Because then
won't
they
wake
can't
up,
do their job.
you know, if I wake up early, then I'm like,
Right.
at my
People don't want to
computer.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
so
and
if I
especially
just
during hurricanes,
start
it's
here,
just like, I mean,
You have a bunch of
you
stuff
gotta
to
be
do
able
tomorrow?
talk to people.
These poor people didn't
Yeah,
see
I mean, I just
tornado
need to
where they were scared to
feel
talk to
behind.
anybody.
Yeah.
And they didn't get help for the
You
longest
just
time.
two
Yeah,
things
they're
then.
sitting in a ruined
Yeah.
house.
That's my goal for tomorrow. That's like my top priority. So.
Because we're like one day from the
I know.
deadline.
Yeah, I know. Tomorrow, that's my,
Had gotten both
That's on my list.
And you said they were about to be divorced.
but everybody's away.
There was an article not too long ago. It was here in Mississippi.
Good.
So I have my
Distraction.
Something like that. See, I think they're gonna do it, and they're gonna
Yeah.
they're gonna go too
like
far.
that all the time.
And then it's gonna be just like,
How did this happen?
the headlines are gonna,
I'm
I mean, they've
serious, and
already
they won't
like,
even, they'll knock on the door and then they'll
was
walk
the
in.
Iranian
And I won't even,
that couldn't go through.
That's why I didn't get up.
Heart surgery.
somebody
Heart
like that.
transplant or something,
And
so
I'm
some
sorry.
kid.
Or they'll let themselves in.
just like,
They
heart
don't know. And then
transplant.
they
So stupid.
And they leave,
Universities, I think,
and I read or anything, but then I'm like,
Harvard and
okay,
a couple other universities were filing a lawsuit.
Yeah,
They were suing because they couldn't get their main professors to come back home.
Yeah.
And we're ready. All right, guys, you ready?
Oh,
Hey, Jim.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
it just tied up? It says actual footage of my kids getting ready for school in the morning.
That's Khalid for real. Sorry. Kyla, sit down. Kyla, sit down.
So,
You gotta go, Monique.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Let me see with them. Come on, Dustin.
Trying to sneak away.
Dustin.
Do I have an intro or do I intro myself?
No, you have an intro. You have someone.
we used an
Okay.
Yeah, I've already done it.
Dustin's outside.
You want to go first?
Let me see.
Introduce your Dustin.
I think I give you.
That's okay, he's got it. He's got it.
I actually not. It's all handy. You got your
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Miss Monique Verdin. I said that's her last name right?
Verdin.
Verdin, okay. A poem to her for me.
Get busy.
Okay, so Monique is a member of the United Houma Nation. She is a filmmaker, photographer, and at the age of 18, she decided to go back to Louisiana to document her grandmother and to preserve the traditional ways of the Houma people. But when she got there, I guess times have changed and everybody gets older and they get wiser, so she realized everything around her was changing and started documenting everything around her. So when she started documenting everything around her, she produced the film My Louisiana Love, which I like, by the way, which brought to light, how people were losing their land to oil companies and natural disasters. She received her bachelor's degree in mass communication at Loyola University in New Orleans. Her photography has been exhibited worldwide. These include The Good Pirates, of the forgotten bayous and habitat for humanity benefit. Albemarle, New Orleans. That is all I got.
Thank you.
Take us away.
I like your stool. I think I might.
Thank you.
borrow it. I didn't bring a slideshow. I could have, but kind of like just having conversation. So I have this. I don't really know what to call myself a lot of the time. Filmmaker, photographer. People often like to put me in the activist category, which I kind of cringe a little bit by that word, even though I know it's not a dirty word, just kind of like, because I feel like, so much of my work, the artwork is responding and reflecting on the environment and on my personal relationship to the land and to my family, and to our way of life, and to our, the actual land and the water. And I feel, the word activist kind of raises these feelings of like being radical. And I feel very much so that I'm just being rational. It's like I want to have a healthy environment to live in. I want to be able to drink water and not be freaked out, or take a shower and think that I'm gonna get a brain-eating amoeba. It doesn't seem that we should have to be so active in fighting for those very basic human rights. And the work has kind of been my teacher in a big way. When I started taking photographs when I was 18 years old, it was because of the waste pits in Grand Bois. So my family, you guys saw the film, my cousin Clarice was fighting, to get these pits shut down in her community, where they were taking what's considered hazardous material and these deep water rigs and putting it on a barge, where that simple exchange makes it non-hazardous according to Louisiana loophole laws, and then they transport that to a community that's inland, less than 500 feet from this community is where they have these open air pits, and it's in a flood zone. So those photographs that we saw earlier, and that really, thank you so much for those visuals, because I think they say so much about where we are and the complex realities that we're living under. And I like to remind people that the Mississippi River Delta is a power point for the planet. It's a place where migratory birds are flying through. It's a place where fish are coming in to reproduce, and shellfish, and shrimp and crabs and oysters. It's the bounty of the Gulf of Mexico basin. That provides life for that whole ocean basin there. So for me, I find like I'm like horrified, at 18, just like, oh my God, I can't believe that we call ourselves civilized and this is happening to people. And then I just kind of got led further and further down the bayou, and met with more and more of my family members who were my elders who were saying, hey, there was a pecan grove that was here, and now my cousins are fishing crabs where there was land. It's now water. And that's, okay, so they're, elders. That's my grandmother was in her 90s when she was telling me about this. But I've been now, I'm 36 now, so I'm not 14-year-old, but there are 14-year-olds who say, I remember there was land there where we used to play, and now that's open water too. So it's happening at such a fast rate, and then on top of that, so we have this legacy of the last 80 years, what took Mother Nature 5,000 years to create, which that land that the river built, is some of the freshest, newest land on the planet, which is why it's compacting and subsiding. That's a natural thing. But we've had all of these interventions interventions, and we've been trying to re-engineer Mother Nature to suit our needs. And you know, Louisiana is either producing or transporting a third of the nation's oil and gas. That's a lot. You know, we're also on the bottom of the list when it comes to everything else. You know, we have the most poverty. We have, you know, well, I think we're like neck and neck with Mississippi here, so we're
sharing that.
you know, but also Mississippi, the whole Gulf South is really dependent on these oil ports. You know, Port Fourchon and Venice, and you know, South Louisiana is providing jobs for not only people in Louisiana, but people very, very far away from the Gulf South too. I mean, I used to work for it was like deep water specialist. We hired all the electrical, mechanical, instrumentation techs that worked on these deep water rigs, which I kind of, you know, it's funny that I like had that job at that time, and so I was, you know, working in the industry, working for the industry. Actually, it was one of the easiest jobs ever. I like got paid $15 an hour and basically just like tell guys they had to go take a drug test and fill out this paperwork, you know. And it was like, it was kind of funny. Where it was, and the other women who were making more money than me, they did less. But no, I'm just kidding. Oh my God, don't film. No, but no, it's fine. I mean, I guess my point there though is that, you know, fast forward 5 years or so, and you know, the Deepwater Horizon explosion happening in 2010, and that really kind of was a slap in the face, because what I thought was, you know, this disaster in my cousin's backyard, these waste pits being in the backyard of a community, suddenly was that there was our nation's backyard, there was this huge toxic hazardous disaster. And I was actually, my mom is based in Pensacola, Florida, and I was there during the spill, and remember riding out with one of my best friends from childhood, and you know, he and I have been fishing those waters all of our lives together, and we have this annual fishing trip every summer. And that was the last summer we ever went out together, actually, which is kind of sad to think about, but it was this like nightmare, really, where we were riding out of the Pensacola Pass, and you could just see this tide line, you know, as far as you could see, the tide lines of this like orange goop of oil where they had been spraying the Corexic. So it's like to, you know, make the oil sink essentially. And so it was just coming in, and here are these guys in these boats, and they have these like paper towels, it looked like paper towels in their hands, and they're like riding through these oil lines and just like leaning on the side. It was with garbage bags, putting them into the garbage bags. And it was kind of one of those moments where it's like, oh my God, like we can put people on the moon, but this is our cleanup response for a major oil spill, you know? And I think, you know, I went to Paris in 2015. They had the Conference of Parties, the 21st Conference of Parties, for them to agree on a climate agreement. And we actually signed that agreement. The United States signed that agreement. But there's talk now with the new administration to be kind of backtracking on those steps. But I found it a little like a slap in the face, where our government is signing this, you know, the Paris Accord, saying that we're going to cut emissions and that we're going to, you know, try to be more responsible, and, you know, if we can, when we, you know, the language was very kind of wishy-washy, but it also was an agreement saying that like, hey, we're acknowledging this and we're going to take action. But I came home and I found out that the Gulf of Mexico was for sale, and that these, you know, millions of acres of deep water tracts were up for auction. And so in March of last year, so March 23rd actually of last year, was one of the first of this kind of, not one of the first, but was towards the end of this kind of, because they do these 5-year lease agreements, federal government, for deep water. And so, so they're like auctioning off 23 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, and we kind of tried to organize, and I've not been an organizer in the sense of like being in the trenches and organizing people being an advocate in that sense. I mean, I've used, you know, my Louisiana love story to tell the story of what's happening here, but not really ever having kind of a movement of like telling people to do or to go or to sign this, or you know, that's never been like our agenda. But I felt really passionately about the Gulf just because I saw what happened, you know, firsthand for BP people. My people were out of work, you know, we're all wondering still if the seafood is safe to eat. I mean, I eat it, but I don't know, you know. I know that they're still pulling tar balls in their nets at times too. You know, and I think that the Gulf of Mexico has become the nation's sacrifice as they were taking the Atlantic off the table for deep water exploration, and the Arctic is kind of on the table, off the table, you know. But there's this new lease, 5-year lease plan that the feds just released. There's one auction in Alaska, and the rest is all in the Gulf of Mexico, and these are millions of acres that they just keep putting up. And you know, Shell Oil is drilling in the deepest waters in the world in the Gulf of Mexico. And when we went to one of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management meetings, which they're the federal entity that kind of oversees the offshore leasing, there's this guy there, and there were only 3 of us that showed up for this meeting, right? And they were like so excited that we were there, you know, because like, I don't know, I think if they had cookies, they would have given us cookies, but I think they can't do that legally or something, you know. So anyways, they have this meeting, there's 3 of us there, and they're like, okay, this is, you know, option A, option is us to do whatever we want to do, option B is kind of, option C is, you know, to do nothing. And so the 3 people who were there, we were all like, we want option C. Like, there's enough infrastructure, there's enough carbon that's being pulled out of the Gulf right now, no more new leases. So the guy there, he's like, oh, you know, I can answer any of your questions, I'm here all day. And my friend who was with us said, well, what is it that makes it, you know, BP happened in 5,000 feet of water. This lease auction was happening between 5,000 and 11,000 feet of water in March of last year. And so he says, you know, what makes it safe? Like, why do you guys think it's safer now to go into those waters than it was, you know, than BP? And the guy basically was just like, well, because Congress says so. That was his answer. You know, there's no like science behind it. They're essentially like going to the moon to pull carbon out of the Gulf, and they've never done it before.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, totally.
Wow.
So I think that, you know, that on top of then, you know, this summer watching what was happening up in North Dakota with the Dakota Access Pipeline, and seeing and knowing our people in South Louisiana, you know, we have 10,000 miles of pipelines that have been cut through our wetlands. Not to mention that we have 87,000 miles of pipeline onshore right now. So that's a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's already there. And you have to remember that it's all coming from like World War II. So a lot of that infrastructure is really old. And on top of it, you have this rapidly decaying landscape. So a friend of mine who does tree planting in my community in St. Bernard Parish was telling me that this whole pipeline, because I was saying, oh, you know, have you guys heard about the Bayou Bridge, which is essentially like the southern leg of the Dakota Access. So Dakota Access comes down, taps into Illinois. There's another kind of terminal where then it gets sent in different directions, and one of those lines is the Energy Transfer Partner line. It follows the Mississippi River watershed essentially. It crosses Louisiana, it crosses the Mississippi in Louisiana, and then it taps into another terminal that's in Texas. And from Texas, they're built, so essentially that Bakken shale would be coming down to Illinois and then following the Mississippi River south, crossing our territory here in Louisiana, and going through Mississippi, and all going through like some of the most, some of the poorest communities in the country, right? And then going to Texas, and then it doubles back. The Bayou Bridge leg of that doubles back, goes to Lake Charles, and then it's going to cut across that beautiful Atchafalaya, which the Atchafalaya is, it's a national heritage site,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
not federally protected, right? So cutting across, you know, many water bodies, and cutting underneath the Bayou Lafourche, which the Lafourche means the fork. So it was, you know, in old historical records, the fork of the Chitimacha, or the Houma, or you know, there were other tribes that were kind of all going and moving in the territory, especially after colonial times. You know, you have the English coming in from the east and kind of pushing those coastal coastal Indians towards the west of the Mississippi, and so the Houma are Biloxi, they're Chitimacha, they're Takapa, they're Choctaw. You know, they're mixed bands that kind of united in the Delta there, and found, you know, they were able to maintain their sovereignty for a very long time. I mean, until, you know, my grandmother's generation, the turn of the century in the 1900s, where, yeah, you know, they dodged the Trail of Tears. They were able to kind of, you know, go be connected by this web of bayous. They had these scattered settlements. They were able to still live off the land. They were able to, you know, continue living as free people. And at a time when South Louisiana, you were either black or white post, you know, post Civil War, things changed. So, you know, but now you have, sorry, I got kind of off track there, but, you know, you have this important water body, the Bayou Lafourche, that's providing 300,000 people with drinking water, and they're wanting to run this pipeline underneath this water body, and on top of it, we have a coastal restoration master plan for the state where they're wanting, because they know that our land is collapsing, and the only way to really combat that is to reintroduce, you know, it's essentially you have to like re-engineer Mother Nature so that Mother Nature can do what it's supposed to do, because we engineered it way back then and we've screwed it up so quickly, you know. So yeah, reconnecting the river to those wetlands is crucial, and the Bayou Lafourche reintroduction of fresh water is a part of that master plan. But it seems like a double-edged sword when you're saying, you know, the state's going, oh, well, we'll let this pipeline come through, but also, you know, we have this coastal plan that's dependent on this fresh water, but then we're basically kind of, you know, rolling the dice, you know, with the possibility. And they're not going as deep as they do in other territories. Why is that? I don't know. So, you know, I mean, I think that with My Louisiana Love, it was funny, we had at one point gotten to what we thought was the end, and that was before BP, and I was kind of like, no, this is not the end, you know, I don't just like go home after all of this disaster. And then BP happened, and it was like, oh, right, capstone, that's like, proves our point that there's this cycle that keeps happening. First the land gets taken away, then the oil and gas canals get dredged, then the oil pits get put in your backyard, then Katrina comes and you got major oil spill in a residential community, and then, you know, BP. But I think the disaster is still ongoing, you know, the land is still disappearing. We don't have enough money or enough time to ever be able to get Louisiana back to where it was 80 years ago. And now all of the predictions are coming out, because every 5 years they come out with a new master plan. So our current master plan is now open for public comment, but the predictions, because the scientists have gotten better at their modeling, and the predictions are coming out with more extreme warnings for what's on the horizon. You know, and there are communities that they've been saying this for a while, you know, the communities will be sacrificed, but now they're starting to say which communities. And Ile de Jean Charles, which is historically a Houma community, there also is a tribe, they broke away from the United Houma Nation back in the late 90s under the advice of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but that's a whole other story. But so there's the Biloxi Chitimacha Choctaw Federation of Muskogee, Band of Ile de Jean Charles, that are, there's about 15 to 20 families that are registered with the BCCM, and then there's about 10 families that are United Houma Nation that live on this very small island where people have been leaving for many years now. You know, they've been moving a little bit further up the bayou, not that far, not out of Hurricane Alley by any means, but you know, what the state is saying, the state of Louisiana has gotten this first federal climate relocation grant, which is huge because we know that we will not be the only ones. There will be more communities, coastal communities, and especially Alaska. Interestingly enough, Alaska and South Louisiana have a lot in common as far as people having to retreat from the coast and thinking about how we adapt to these changing times. You know, so there's this, this is happening, and it's happening now, and it's happening in our lifetime, and we know that, you know, our Houma communities are all at the ends of these roads in these tiny little bayou towns that are on the front lines. And so what is to come is very uncertain, and how we maintain our sovereignty moving forward. You know, not only have we lost our land rights over dirty dealings in the past, but now we're actually losing our land, the physical land. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of rambling. We can talk, if you guys can, if you want to interrupt or have, yeah.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I worked with Tammy on the Monique building, and I was talking to Noreen and Chief Dardar. What was that white powder? Because Chief Dardar said you could take a crab or something and touch the shell and it would crack. It was like a white powder that was spread everywhere. And I guess that's the stuff to soak up the oil. Do they know what that is, or have you heard of that?
I don't know about.
It was a powder that was spread to absorb the oil.
Yeah, I know that.
The planes flew over.
Yeah, that's probably correct. The correct sick.
Okay, that's
which
what
is
it is.
actually illegal. Like it's not. There was, we were talking with a tribal member who works for offshore. He's worked offshore, and you know, and this is the reality is that like all of our people are tied to the oil and gas industry. And if we're not tied to the oil and gas industry, then we're tied to tourism, and tourism is totally tied to the oil and gas industry in a big way. You know, so it's like we know. I mean, and so many of our men work in the oil field. You know, they're boat captains, they're welders, they're roustabouts, they're crane operators. I mean, it's not that we're not part of this. I mean, that's our main economy, you know. So, but this guy was saying that, on their rig, they're not allowed to even touch that stuff, the crux-it, because they'll get fined out the wazoo. But when BP happened, all of those rules were kind of thrown out of the window. And I know that, there was weird stuff on my car, and when I was on the coast, we wake up the next morning. But I don't ever remember seeing a white powder. But I think it's probably the crux-it. Yeah.
And all those chemical dispersants and the absorbents and all those, you get a room full of scientists and they can't agree on what actually they're doing. Like no one knows.
Right.
And it's like they seem to be they certainly are effective out in the open ocean of kind of coagulating it, but when it starts to interact with the land, they just don't know.
Right.
And it's just they've altered the water chemistry, of the Gulf of Mexico, and they have absolutely no idea what they're doing.
Right.
But it's like, well, better this than to slick the coast,
Right.
But what are these people going to do? Because I know Tammy said there's a Vietnamese community there, and there's other communities that rely on the fishing industry. What are these people going to do when that's not there anymore? If something happens.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that our communities don't want to talk about that. Like, we want to push the mud out and just go back to our normal lives. But we're getting to a point where, we are going to have to start preparing better for what is to come. Because we've been, the warnings are all there. Unfortunately, it's in times of disaster when decisions get made. And sometimes those decisions get made really rapidly, and community doesn't have a voice in that process. I think that we're trying to talk about it more. we're trying to prepare for it more. We're trying to kind of think about alternatives. I mean, the Houma weren't always a coastal people. You know, there's records of them being more north. You know, the Baton Rouge, the Red Stick. That they were pushed there. You know, they adapted, and I think that we're in a time of adaptation, and we are faced with these unprecedented challenges, and we're playing games with the chemistry and the water quality, and I think that it's really important for us to advocate for the seventh generation, for us to say that yeah, we want what we want now, but if we don't hold back and start giving a little more foresight, we're gonna just keep digging this hole that we've gotten ourselves into, and we're not gonna get out. And I also think that unfortunately, I think that the Gulf South often gets the short end of the stick. We also have some of the most resources. We should have more say. I don't know how we get there, but I think that in moving forward and thinking about the oil and gas industry and the protection of the Gulf of Mexico, and someone was telling me too that the ocean, we don't realize that the ocean, there's so much of that ocean that ends up in the air that we're breathing, that we're dependent on, that there are these like, you can't see it, but it's like you need that water body to be healthy so that you can be healthy wherever you are, near that. So I think the interconnectedness of everything we need to pay more attention to. And I also think that, we need to, I always say this, that, the people in the South, before we had oil and gas, we had cotton and sugar cane. And we're still living very much so under a plantation mentality. And I think that our people, not only Houma people, but people in the South, they've been put in the corner and they've been told, you got this or you got nothing. And so, yeah, you don't see a whole lot of people, environmentalists, here kind of, trying to have acts of civil disobedience, because people are afraid that if they don't have, that if they speak up, then they'll lose their jobs with the industry. I mean, that's a very real thing. I had a cousin who wouldn't come to a play that I was in because he worked for a company that he was afraid that if somebody, I'm like, who's gonna see you? I mean, it's a play, it's not, but I think that those fears are definitely there. And the reality is that, yeah, you will lose your job. I mean, my husband works as, he's an environmentalist, he does coastal vegetation restoration planting, but the people who sit on his board are also part of the industry as well. And so he's sometimes happy that I have a different last name than him. But I mean, I think that that's the environmental side of it too. I mean, he's not working in the refinery, he's working to restore the coast, so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of overwhelming to think about. I also think that we have to remember, in these times of great change, and I don't think it's a South Louisiana coastal thing, I think it's just, our world is changing really rapidly, and we're having to choose what we're going to hold on to, what we're going to protect, whether that be our plants or that be our cultural traditions. I mean, we're really having, and I think as we move forward, we're going to have to decide more and more. I mean, I feel that very much so about, my family who live at the ends of the roads, that they're, I see the babies and it's like, okay, well, we're not going to be doing this when you're 20 years old, but what will we be able to do here, or how will we be able to maintain our relationship to this place and to each other? Because as the communities get broken, that does something to the network. You don't have that same, I mean, even in the last, oh my God, I've been photographing my family now for 20 years, which is kind of crazy for me to think about, that I've, kind of meditating on where we are and who we are. And and I'm really grateful for what it's taught me. It also, sometimes I'm like, why did I want to know that? You know, because it makes you want to beat your head against the wall at times too, you know.
Do
Like,
you think BP's kind of holding the Houma back for federal recognition? Do you think these $3.8 billion industries are kind of holding the Houma back because once you guys get federal recognition, that opens up a whole different ballgame?
yeah, I think that, you know, the Houma territory is on top of a black gold mine, and you know, if they acknowledged who we are and that this is our territory and that, you know, then they would have to, yeah, so I think it's like a can of worms. And it actually in the past, you know, when we had politicians that were trying to help us to get federally recognized, you know, one part of the package that they were presenting, which was kind of like a smoke and mirrors game, I think, but was that we would not have a land base. A land base was not going to be part of the deal.
Like, get a float out there.
And no game.
Territory without land.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were going to be like, oh, you're federally recognized, but no land for you, you know. So, and you know, there are these old treaty, you know, there's this the oral history says that there is this treaty that was made with the Spanish, and that, you know, our territory was between the Atchafalaya and the Mississippi rivers. So that's the heart of the Delta, you know, but it's, yeah, those records can't be found, and then when the Americans came in, they're like, well, we don't know of any law that says Indians own anything, you know, and I think I say this a lot too, which is, you know, to think about where we are now, you know, you really have to look back 500 years to the doctrine of discovery, which essentially is this old papal law that gave colonizers permission to go and take what they wanted, and as long as they were making the savages Christians and slaves or whatever, you know. So I think, and that all international law currently is like based upon that foundation, you know, that this is how our world is still running off of that old ridiculous law, and that's why we're here now, you know. And so I think that acknowledging the rights of indigenous people, but acknowledging the rights of Mother Nature are so important for us to remind each other and our politicians that, you know, and I think that, you know, the nature always shows us that you know, she is much stronger than whatever we can build or think that we can control. You know, it's only so long that you can hold the river back. And I think that what's being planned for South Louisiana, it is unprecedented restoration. I mean, it will be a, you know, we have levees now. This levee that surrounds my community in I live in St. Bernard Parish, so I'm the southeasternmost band, and you know, we have this $1 billion levee system that's around us. We also have 2 major oil refineries that are within our community, and we have some of the worst air quality in the nation. We have sulfur dioxide, and that's coming primarily from, you know, one of the refineries sells their pet coke, which is like the cooked off stuff, like the refuse from the refining process, but then they sell it to this other company that then creates energy out of it, but it's like the nastiest, dirtiest, yuckiest stuff. And so, yeah, so we've been unable to meet air quality standards for a really long time.
Through no fault of your own.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's what's so sad about it is,
Right.
you know, it's these companies burning
Yeah.
the nastiest
Sludge.
sludge at the bottom of the refining
Yeah.